Imagine this. You are standing alone in the early morning hush of a dense rainforest. A soft mist clings to the undersides of wide, waxy leaves. The canopy far above is alive with birdsong measured melodic calls echoing through filtered light. Beneath your feet, the forest floor stirs with invisible lives, colonies of ants, fairy leaf fragments. Fungi exchange nutrients with tree roots through a web of underground filaments, and a single beetle pushes against the moss-covered earth. Everything is connected. Everything is alive. This quiet orchestra of life is what ecology seeks to understand. In the most gentle terms, ecology is the scientific study of interactions between organisms and their environment. It is not limited to rainforests, oceans, or remote wildernesses. It exists in the crevices of city sidewalks, within the microbial communities in your gut, and even across vast biogeochemical cycles that link continents and clouds. Ecology asks how life sustains itself, how systems endure or collapse, and how one change, one shift in temperature, one invasive species, one clearing of land can echo across time and space. The word ecology derives from the Greek words oikos, meaning house, and logos, meaning study. It is, in essence, the study of our home, not just the earth, but the complex networks that make life on this planet possible. These networks are vast, interlocking systems of cause and effect, adaptation and resilience. They include relationships as intimate as a bee pollinating a flower and as expansive as atmospheric carbon cycling through forests, oceans, and human lungs. But before we explore those vast networks, we begin small. Ecology is built upon foundational questions. What lives? Where and why? What resources do organisms need to survive? And how do they acquire them? How do populations change over time? How do species coexist or fail to coexist in shared habitats? The answers to these questions are seldom straightforward. Rather, they unfold like quiet narratives, full of nuance and complexity. Consider a simple pond. At a glance, it may seem tranquil and self-contained, but peer closer. Within its boundaries live frogs, algae, insects, fish, birds, bacteria, and plants, all interdependent, all influenced by temperature, water chemistry, nutrient availability, and seasonal light. A frog may feed on insects, but those insects may depend on aquatic plants, which in turn rely on sunlight and carbon dioxide. Even the decomposing leaf at the pond's edge plays a role, offering nutrients to microbes that help sustain the entire community. These layers of interaction, though easily overlooked, form the very fabric of ecological study. Ecology is often described as being hierarchical, progressing from individual organisms to populations, communities, ecosystems, and ultimately to the biosphere. At each level, new patterns emerge. Individual behaviors shape population dynamics. Populations form communities that compete, cooperate. Communities operate within ecosystems, where physical and biological processes merge. And all ecosystems are bound within the biosphere, the thin shell of life that surrounds our planet, suspended between rock and sky. This structure helps scientists organize complexity without losing the forest for the trees. And yet, even within these categories, ecology resists simplification. Systems are rarely closed or predictable. Feedback loops, thresholds, and nonlinear interactions are common. An ecological disturbance, such as a wildfire, might initially seem destructive, but it can also reset a forest's growth, release nutrients, and open space for new species. Likewise, the introduction of a single non-native species, whether a zebra mussel in the Great Lakes or a rabbit in Australia, can trigger cascading effects far beyond initial expectations. Ecology is therefore not only descriptive, but deeply investigative. It intersects with other sciences: biology, geology, climatology, even economics and sociology, to ask how human behavior fits into these natural webs. It acknowledges that humans are not separate from the environment, but part of it. Our cities function as ecosystems. Our agriculture depends on pollinators, soil microbes, and climate regulation. Our health is influenced by the air we breathe and the food chains we rely upon. These truths have become increasingly evident in the face of ecological crisis: loss of biodiversity, habitat fragmentation, pollution, and climate change. Yet ecology is also a science of hope. It offers models of resilience, restoration, and coexistence. It reveals that systems can recover when given the chance, and that small actions, protecting a wetland, planting native species, reducing emissions, can ripple outward to affect change. Even at its most complex, ecology reminds us of the beauty in balance, of the elegance in diversity, and of the subtle intelligence that exists in even the most modest of organisms. As we begin this journey through the world of ecology, we invite you to slow down and listen to the wind in the grasses, the whisper of fungal threads beneath forest floors, the movements of species you may never see but which shape your world. Nonetheless, this is not a world of noise or spectacle, but of quiet intricacy. In the chapters to come, we will move from the building blocks of populations and communities to the grand flows of energy and nutrients, to real-world case studies that show ecology at work. Along the way, we will encounter surprising facts: how a sea otter can shape an entire kelp forest, or how fungi can connect trees in what some scientists call the wood wide web. So settle in, breathe deeply, let your mind wander through canopies and coastlines, deserts and coral reefs. The study of ecology begins with attention, with the quiet act of noticing. And from this noticing, understanding grows. Imagine, for a moment, that you could become smaller, so small, in fact, that you pass between the fibers of your own shirt, through the pores of your skin, and into the microcosmic world that lies within your feet, but instead a dynamic membrane. Towers of protein rise and fall like machinery on a factory floor. All around you, microscopic sacs ripple with energy. You have entered the domain of the cell, the smallest living unit of the human body, and the first true chapter in the anatomy of life. A human body contains roughly 37 trillion cells. These tiny compartments, each surrounded by a thin, semi-permeable membrane, form the structural and functional building blocks of tissues, organs, and systems. Yet, within each one lies an entire world in miniature, self-sustaining universe that breathes, communicates, reproduces, and repairs. At its simplest, a cell is enclosed by a plasma membrane, a delicate yet purposeful boundary, composed mainly of a phospholipid by what enters and exits the cell. It acts as both gatekeeper and guardian, allowing nutrients in, permitting waste out, and maintaining internal stability, or homeostasis. Embedded within this membrane are proteins that act like channels, receptors, and signals, each one part of a continuous conversation between the cell and its environment. Step inside, and we find cytoplasm, the gelatinous fluid that fills the cell's interior. Suspended within it are organelles, each performing a specific task. Think of them as the instruments in an orchestra or the departments within a company, each with a specialized role that contributes to the cell's life. At the center of most cells lies the nucleus, often described as the control center. It houses DNA, the genetic material arranged into structures called chromosomes. DNA is more than just a code. It is the master blueprint for all the proteins the body requires, wrapped tightly and protected within the nuclear envelope. It unspools only when needed, transcribed into RNA, which then travels to the cytoplasm to guide protein assembly. Among the most essential organelles is the mitochondrion, often dubbed the powerhouse of the cell. But this is more than just a metaphor. Mitochondria performs cellular respiration, a process that converts glucose and oxygen into adenosine triphosphate, or ATPase energy currency that powers almost all cellular activities. Imagine chemical reactions like tiny bonfires, controlled, efficient, and ongoing, releasing the energy that fuels muscle contraction, nerve transmission, and even quiet thought. In a single human cell, there may be hundreds to thousands of mitochondria, depending on the tissue's energy demand. For example, cardiac muscle cells, which never rest, are rich in mitochondria, while skin cells may contain fewer. These organelles have their own DNA, hinting at their evolutionary origins as once independent organisms, now seamlessly integrated into human life. Surrounding the nucleus and mitochondria, other organelles lend their services. Exists in two forms, rough and smooth. The rough, studied with ribosomes, is where proteins are synthesized, assembled from amino acids, like beads on a string. The smooth lacks ribosomes, but plays vital roles in lipid synthesis, detoxification, and calcium storage. Once synthesized, proteins travel to the Golgi apparatus, a stacked, membranous structure that modifies, sorts, and packages them for delivery. Think of it as a cellular post office, ensuring each molecule reaches the right destination inside or outside the cell. Other components include lysosomes, which digest cellular waste, and peroxisomes, which neutralize toxins. Even the cytoskeleton, composed of microfilaments and microtubules, plays a role in maintaining cell shape, enabling movement, and anchoring organelles. Yet cells are not static. They grow, divide, and die, processes that mirror the cycles of life itself. The most fundamental of these is mitosis, the process by which a single cell divides to form two genetically identical daughter cells. Mitosis is central to growth, healing, and cellular turnover. Each day, millions of skin, blood, and intestinal cells are replaced through this tightly regulated process. Its precision is extraordinary. The cell must duplicate its DNA, align its chromosomes, and evenly split its contents, all while maintaining the integrity of its function. But not all cells are destined for duplication. Stem cells, however, are uniquely equipped for both self-renewal and differentiation, the ability to develop into specialized cell types. Embryonic stem cells can become nearly any cell in the body, from neurons to muscle fibers, while adult stem cells are more limited but still vital, especially in tissues like bone marrow and skin. They lie at the heart of regenerative medicine, with the potential to repair damaged tissues or even grow replacement organs. Their presence in the adult body provides a reservoir for healing, and their manipulation in laboratories opens new frontiers in treating diseases from leukemia to Parkinson's. Despite their diversity, immune share this common architecture, this molecular toolkit. Their internal environments may differ, but the core machinery is conserved. This unifying structure allows cells to specialize while still speaking a common biochemical language. PATHWA's complex networks of proteins and molecules that respond to stimuli and regulate behavior. For example, in response to injury, signaling cascades can instruct a cell to divide, migrate, or secrete healing factors. Communication can be local between adjacent cells or distant, mediated by hormones carried in the bloodstream. Even in rest, a cell is never truly still. Proteins are continuously produced and degraded. Organelles move along microtubule tracks, and ions flow in and out, maintaining voltage differences across membranes. Neurons, for instance, rely on such electrical gradients to transmit impulses, tiny voltage shifts that result in thought, perception, and motion. Understanding the cell is like understanding a seed. From the zygotes, the single cell formed at conception, to the fully developed human body. This cellular machinery repeats and refines itself, generation after generation. In every breath we take, every step we walk, and every wound we heal, cellular processes unfold quietly and faithfully. They knit flesh from protein, generate thought from ions, and power motion from glucose. They are the quiet artisans of the human experience, unseen yet indispensable. And now, from this cellular foundation, we are ready to step outward to see how these microscopic units combine to form the tissues that shape our bodies. Just as individual notes become a melody, so to do cells become the living architecture of form. Let us turn now to that next layer of complexity. Picture the human body not as a machine, but as a finely woven tapestry, threaded together, not with cotton or silk, but with living strands of cellular fabric. Every surface, every contour, every internal structure is made not from steel or stone, but from tissue arrangements of cells, bound by function and form. As we leave the microscopic world of the single cell behind, we now enter the realm of tissues, the next order of life's quiet architecture. Tissues are groups of similar cells working together toward a common goal. They provide structure, protect delicate areas, send messages, and generate movement. The human body contains 4 primary tissue types: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. Each one is distinct in its role, but together they form the living fabric of anatomy, an intricate loom where the warp and weft of biology are drawn tight. Let us begin with epithelial tissue, smooth, cellular covering that defines the boundaries between our inner selves and the outside world. Epithelia line every exposed surface: the skin, the inner lining of the digestive tract, the airways of the lungs, and the blood vessels that trace through our organs. Imagine tiles on a floor or shingles on a rooftop. layered, organized, protective. Epithelial tissue can be simple, with a single cell layer, or stratified, with multiple layers. It may be flat, squamous, cube-shaped cuboidal, or columnar, depending on its location and function. In the lungs, thin squamous cells enable gas exchange. In the intestines, tall columnar cells absorb nutrients. These layers are anchored to a basement membrane, a thin scaffold that connects epithelium to the tissues below. But epithelial cells do more than cover. Many specialize to secrete substances forming glands that produce sweat, saliva, hormones, or enzymes. Others bear tiny cilia, like brushes that sweep mucus and debris from the respiratory tract. And still others form tight junctions, sealing gaps to prevent leakage between cells. Epithelia are constantly renewed, especially in areas subject to friction, like the skin or stomach lining. Here, stem cells divide, push upward, and are eventually shed like leaves falling from a tree. Beneath and between epithelial layers, we encounter connective tissue, perhaps the most diverse and expansive of the tissue families. Connective tissues provide support, anchor organs, store energy, and transport materials. Unlike which are densely packed, connective tissues contain fewer cells and more extracellular matrixa, mixture of fibers and ground substance that defines their texture and strength. Some connective tissues are soft and pliable. Loose connective tissue fills spaces between organs, cushions, blood vessels, and supports epithelial layers. It contains fibroblasts, which produce collagen and elastin proteins that give the tissue its resilience and stretch. Adipose tissue, or body fat, stores energy in the form of lipid droplets and insulates the body against heat loss. Other connective tissues are firmer. Dense connective tissue forms the ligaments and tendons that link bones and muscles. These are rich in tightly packed collagen fibers, aligned like ropes under tension. Cartilage, a semi-rigid form, cushions, joints, and shapes the nose, ears, and trachea. It contains chondrocytes, cells that reside in small chambers called lacunae, surrounded by a smooth, rubbery matrix. At its strongest extreme, connective tissue becomes bone, or osseous tissue. Bone is mineralized, giving it strength and rigidity. It contains osteocytes, cells housed within concentric rings of calcium matrix, much like the rings of a tree. Despite its hardness, bone is alive, remodeled constantly through the actions of bone-forming osteoblasts and bone-resorbing osteoclasts. Circulating through all these tissues is yet another form of connective tissue, blood. Though it seems fluid and transient, blood meets the criteria of connective tissue. It contains cells, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets suspended in a matrix called plasma. Blood transports oxygen, nutrients, hormones, and waste. It also serves as the medium for immune defense and clotting. Next, we turn to muscle tissue, the engine of movement. Muscle is unique among the tissues for its ability to contract, producing force and motion. The body contains three types: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Skeletal muscle attaches to bones and enables voluntary movement. Under the microscope, it appears striated, banded, due to the organized arrangement of contractile proteins. Skeletal muscle fibers are long, cylindrical, and multinucleated. They respond to signals from the nervous system with rapid, powerful contractions. Cardiac muscle, found only in the heart, is also striated, but differs in that its cells are branched and interconnected by structures called intercalated discs. These discs allow electrical signals to pass swiftly between cells, ensuring the heart contracts in a coordinated, rhythmic beat roughly 100,000 times per day across a lifetime. Smooth muscle, as its name implies, lacks striations. It lines the walls of hollow organs, blood vessels, intestines, the bladder, and contracts involuntarily, moving blood, food, or waste through internal pathways. Smooth muscle fibers are spindle-shaped and function with endurance rather than speed, often maintaining tone for long periods without fatigue. Finally, we reach nervous tissue, the body's information network, composed of neurons and glial cells. Nervous tissue detects stimuli, processes information, and initiates responses. A neuron consists of a cell body, branching dendrites that receive signals, and a long axon that sends impulses over long distances, sometimes more than a meter in length. Neurons communicate through synapses, tiny gaps where chemical messengers, called neurotransmitters, bridge the space between cells. Surrounding the neurons are glial cells, supportive cells that nourish, insulate, and protect the neural network. In the brain, glia outnumber neurons roughly 10 to 1, forming a silent but essential scaffolding for thought. To see tissues clearly, one must often turn to the microscope. In histology, the study of tissues, glass slides reveal cellular arrangements like miniature landscapes, layers of cells like bricks in a wall, fibrous networks like spider webs, or waves of muscle bundled like braided rope, stained with dyes like hematoxylin and eosin. These slices come alive in color, revealing nuclei, cytoplasm, and matrix. Understanding tissues is to understand the vocabulary of the body's construction. Each organ is a sentence built from these 4 tissue types, arranged and emphasized to match function with form. The skin, for instance, combines epithelial protection, connective support, nervous detection, and smooth muscle control. The intestine weaves together absorption, movement, and immune defense in a single, fluid motion. Tissues are the threshold between the microscopic and the visible, the place where cells take on form and purpose. From this layer, we move now to the first true system, to the skin, the body's largest organ, and its barrier to the world. Let us trace its contours and understand how it both shelters and senses the world around us. Imagine you are standing in a vast open field, the horizon rippling with golden grasses. In the distance, a herd of antelope grazes quietly, and above them, a hawk circles in the pale blue sky. Now, shift your imagination to the ocean floor, where coral polyps extend their delicate arms from limestone homes, hosting fish that shimmer like fragments of the sun. Though these places differ in every visible way, one sun-drenched and windswept, the other submerged and dappled with light, they share something profound. Both are ecosystems, complex architectures of life woven together by structure and interaction. An ecosystem is more than a collection of organisms. It is a dynamic system composed of both biotic elements, living things like plants, animals, fungi, and microbes, and abiotic components such as light, temperature, soil, water, and minerals. Together, these elements interact in ways that shape how energy flows and matter cycles, giving each ecosystem its distinct identity. At a larger scale, ecosystems are grouped into biomes. A biome is a broad ecological region defined by its climate, particularly temperature and precipitation patterns, and the dominant forms of vegetation it supports. Though ecosystems within a biome may differ in species composition, they share structural and functional similarities that reflect the environmental conditions they evolved within. Let us now travel slowly across the biomes of Earth, each a quiet theater where life plays out in elegant choreography. We begin in the tropical rainforest, a biome near the equator where temperatures are warm year-round and rainfall is abundant. These forests are often considered the most biologically diverse ecosystems on Earth. Towering trees form a dense canopy, filtering sunlight into shifting green shadows below. Beneath them, layers of understory and forest floor teem with ferns, vines, insects, amphibians, and mammals. The architecture of the rainforest is vertical. Each layer, from the emergent trees above to the leaf litter below, supports its own community of species. Yet, despite the lush vegetation, the soils are often nutrient poor. Rapid decomposition and uptake by roots mean nutrients rarely linger. Life here thrives not from abundance in the soil, but from the ceaseless cycling of organic material. Next, we drift to the savanna, a grassland punctuated by scattered trees, stretching across Africa, South America, and parts of Australia. The savanna experiences distinct wet and dry seasons. Fire, both natural and human-set, plays a pivotal role in maintaining its structure by suppressing tree growth and recycling nutrients. Savannas are home to iconic megafauna elephants, zebras, lions whose migrations and interactions shape the land. Grasses dominate, adapted to periodic droughts and grazing. Below-ground root systems extend deep, anchoring the soil and tapping into hidden water sources. The savanna's simplicity is deceptive. Beneath its open sky lies a web of seasonal rhythms and finely tuned balances. As we ascend in latitude or elevation, temperatures drop and precipitation becomes more variable. We arrive in the temperate, deciduous forest, a biome found in eastern North America, Europe. Trees like oak, maple, and beech shed their leaves in autumn, a strategy to conserve water during freezing months and to reduce damage from snow accumulation. The forest floor bursts with life in spring, when light filters through leafless branches. As the canopy thickens in summer, shaded aptid species take their turn. Leaf litter accumulates and decomposes slowly, enriching the soil with organic matter. Many animals, deer, foxes, insects, and songbirds time their life cycles to the forest's changing palette. Further north, we encounter the boreal forest, also known as taiga. This biome forms a vast green girdle across Canada, Scandinavia, and Russia. Long, cold winters and short, cool summers define the boreal climate. Here, coniferous trees, spruce, fir, and pine, their needles adapted to retain moisture and shed snow. The soil beneath is often acidic and nutrient poor, with layers of slowly decaying plant material called peat. Many organisms, including moose, wolves, and owls, are uniquely adapted to this harsh environment. In summer, wetlands form from melting snow, attracting migratory birds that breed during the brief, warm season. The boreal forest stores immense quantities of carbon, making it vital to global climate regulation. Moving to the poles, we find the tundra, where life persists despite extreme cold, permafrost, and limited daylight. The Arctic tundra, in particular, is treeless and dominated by mosses, lichens, sedges, and low shrubs. The growing season is short, yet wildflowers bloom in a sudden flush of color when snow retreats. Permafrost, permanently frozen, ground prevents deep root penetration and influences drainage patterns. Many animals, such as caribou and Arctic foxes, migrate or hibernate to survive the long winters. Despite its sparse appearance, the tundra is delicate and slow to recover from disturbance. Its vegetation and soil locked in a fine balance. From frozen plains to arid lands, we now turn to deserts. These biomes receive very little rainfall, often less than 25 centimeters per year. But not all deserts are hotsome, like the Gobi or Atacama experience cold nights and even freezing winters. What unites deserts is water scarcity. Plants in the desert, such as cacti and succulents, have evolved to conserve water. They store moisture in fleshy tissues, use reduced leaf surfaces to limit evaporation. Animals, too, are adapted to arid life. Many are nocturnal, burrowing during the day and emerging when temperatures drop. The desert, though silent and still by day, comes alive with whispers and motion after dusk. Let us now dive into aquatic ecosystems, which cover more than 70% of Earth's surface. These include freshwater systems, rivers, lakes, wetlands, marine systems such as oceans, estuaries, and coral reefs. Freshwater ecosystems are shaped by flow, depth, and nutrient availability. In rivers and streams, moving water brings oxygen and carries sediment. Organisms such as mayflies, trout, and beavers have adapted to life in current lakes. On the other hand, develop layered structures, warm surface waters above cooler depths below each, with distinct communities. Wetlands are among the most productive ecosystems on Earth. They act as nurseries for fish, filters for water, and buffers against floods. Peat bogs, marshes, and swamps support amphibians, insects, birds, and unique plants like carnivorous pitcher plants and sundew. In marine environments, sunlight defines structure. The photic zone, where light penetrates, supports photosynthetic plankton, the base of the oceanic food web. Below, in the aphotic zone, darkness dominates. Life persists through chemosynthesis, scavenging, and slow metabolic rates. One of the most visually stunning marine ecosystems is the coral reef, found in warm, shallow waters. These reefs harbor an astonishing diversity of life, from reef fish and crustaceans to sea turtles and octopuses. Despite covering less than 1% of the ocean floor, rising ocean temperatures can lead to coral bleaching, where polyps expel their symbiotic algae, losing both color and vitality. Ocean acidification, pollution, and overfishing further threaten these fragile systems. Estuaries, where freshwater meets saltwater, are transitional zones rich in nutrients. Mangroves, salt marshes, and tidal flats buffer coastlines, trap sediments, and serve as critical breeding grounds. The brackish water challenges organisms to tolerate shifting salinity, but the rewards abundant food and shelter support dense populations of birds, shellfish, and juvenile fish. Each ecosystem, whether forest, grassland, desert, or reef, represents a unique architecture, not of bricks or beams, but of interdependence and adaptation. The shape of leaves, the depth of roots, the timing of migration, and the structure of soil microbes all contribute to the form and function of the whole. These architectures are not fixed. They evolve, shift, and respond to disturbance and change. As climate shifts, species migrate. As land is used and reused, ecosystems reassemble in new forms, but even amid change, patterns endure, cycles of energy, layers of structure, and webs of relationship that speak to the unity of life's design. In our next section, we will explore how these ecosystems are not static monuments, but dynamic, evolving systems. From the recodify of volcanic islands to the slow return of forest to abandoned farmland, we will witness succession, disturbance, and the rhythms of renewal that govern the living world. Picture a coral reef beneath the waves, delicate yet durable, teeming with life, constantly built up and broken down by unseen forces. Now imagine that structure living within you, not beneath the sea, but deep under skin and sinew. This is your skeleton, a scaffold of bone that is not dead stone, but living, responsive, tissue growing, reshaping, and quietly adapting to every movement you make. The human skeleton, in its adult form, consists of 206 bones. Each one is part of a greater architecture, forming a dynamic system that supports the body, protects vital organs, stores minerals like calcium and phosphate, and houses the marrow that produces blood. But bones are far more than rigid supports. They are active participants in motion and metabolism structures shaped by time, tension, and use. At the cellular level, bones are governed by a quiet choreography between two key types of cells. Osteoblasts build bone. They secrete a matrix of collagen and other proteins, then mineralize it with calcium phosphate to create hardened tissue. Osteoclasts, by contrast, break bone down. They dissolve minerals and clear out damaged or unneeded tissue. Together, they perform a lifelong balancing act known as bone remodeling, a cycle of renewal that replaces roughly 10% of our skeleton every year. This remodeling is not random. It responds to pressure. Where muscles tug, bones grow thicker. Where stress is absent, they thin. This principle, known as Wolff's Law, explains why astronauts who spend months in microgravity can lose significant bone mass unless they exercise regularly in space. Without the constant pull of gravity, the osteoblasts grow quiet and the skeleton begins to atrophy. Now imagine the structure of a single bone, perhaps the femur, the thigh bone, the longest in the human body. Externally, it appears solid, but inside, it contains two main types of tissue. The outer layer is compact bone, dense and strong, organized into repeating units called ostens, which resemble the growth rings of a tree trunk. Inside lies spongy bone or trabecular bone, a lighter lattice-like tissue that allows for strength with minimal weight. This inner network also houses bone marrow, which comes in two forms: red marrow, responsible for producing red blood cells, white cells, and platelets, and yellow marrow, rich in fat and energy reserves. Bones are connected at joints, or articulations, places where motion is made possible by structure. Some joints, like those in the skull, are immovable. Others, like the shoulder and hip, are synovial joints, surrounded by capsules of fluid that reduce friction and allow a wide range of motion. Within these joints, ligament bands of fibrous connective tissue hold bones together, while tendons connect muscle to bone, enabling movement when muscles contract. Muscles, in turn, act as biological motors. They pull, never push, always, working in pairs or groups to create motion. When a muscle shortens or contracts, it pulls on the tendon, which moves the attached bone. This system of muscles and bones operates on principles of mechanical physics, specifically the use of levers. In anatomical terms, a lever is formed by a bone, the rigid bar, a joint, the fulcrum, and the force generated by muscle contraction. Different types of levers exist in the body. In a classic first-class lever, like the neck balancing the head, the fulcrum sits between the effort and the load. A second-class lever, as seen when standing on tiptoe, places the load between the fulcrum and the effort. The most common type, third-class levers, such as the biceps lifting the forearm, have the effort between the load and the fulcrum. These levers favor speed and range of motion over brute strength, allowing for the fine control that characterizes human movement. Beneath this system lies a subtler sense proprioception, often called the sixth sense. This is the body's ability to sense its own position, movement, and tension without looking. Proprioceptors, specialized sensory receptors found in muscles, tendons, and joints, feed a constant stream of information to the brain. Without them, even simple acts like walking or holding a pen would require conscious visual effort. It is proprioception that allows dancers to move with eyes closed and athletes to adapt mid-stride to uneven ground. To better understand how bones and muscles respond to stress, consider the case of Kenyan distance runners, many of whom hail from the high-altitude region of the Rift Valley. Decades of scientific observation have shown that these athletes often possess a unique combination of long, slender lower limbs, low body mass, and dense yet lightweight bones. Their efficiency arises not only from genetics and training, but from the adaptive shaping of their musculoskeletal system in response to lifelong running, first as children running to school, then as competitors striding across continents. Contrast this with astronauts in orbit. Deprived of weight-bearing activity, they face bone density losses of up to 1% per month. Calcium leaches from their bones, increasing the risk of fractures. Muscle mass also shrinks, particularly in postural muscles that normally resist gravity. To combat this, space agencies require astronauts to follow rigorous resistance training protocols, even in microgravity. When they return to Earth, they must retrain their muscles and rebalance their bones, sometimes relearning how to walk. Clinical snapshots also illustrate how fragile and dynamic this framework can be. In osteoporosis, bone becomes porous and brittle, a silent condition often unnoticed until a fracture occurs. It disproportionately affects postmenopausal women. Picture a coral reef beneath the waves, delicate yet durable, teeming with life, constantly built up and broken down by unseen forces. Now imagine that structure living within you, not beneath the sea, but deep under skin and sinew. This is your skeleton, a scaffold of bone that is not dead stone, but living, responsive, tissue growing, reshaping, and quietly adapting to every movement you make. The human skeleton, in its adult form, consists of 206 bones. Each one is part of a greater architecture, forming a dynamic system that supports the body, protects vital organs, stores minerals like calcium and phosphate, and houses the marrow that produces blood. But bones are far more than rigid supports. They are active participants in motion and metabolism structures shaped by time, tension, and use. At the cellular level, bones are governed by a quiet choreography between two key types of cells. Osteoblasts build bone. They secrete a matrix of collagen and other proteins, then mineralize it with calcium phosphate to create hardened tissue. Osteoclasts, by contrast, break bone down. They dissolve minerals and clear out damaged or unneeded tissue. Together, they perform a lifelong balancing act known as bone remodeling, a cycle of renewal that replaces roughly 10% of our skeleton every year. This remodeling is not random. It responds to pressure. Where muscles tug, bones grow thicker. Where stress is absent, they thin. This principle, known as Wolff's Law, explains why astronauts who spend months in microgravity can lose significant bone mass unless. Imagine tracing the journey of a single red blood cell, a tiny biconcave disc, just 7 micrometers across. It slips through capillaries so narrow it must fold itself to pass. It moves silently but with purpose, carried by a force greater than itself, within a river that never rests. This river is blood, warm, rhythmic, and astonishingly complex. Alongside it flows another, quieter stream, the lymph, which gathers what blood leaves behind, filters it, and defends its borders. Together, blood and lymph form the circulatory and lymphatic systems, a pair of interwoven highways and checkpoints, essential not only for survival, but for balance, repair, and memory. At the center of this network is the heart. About the size of a clenched fist, the human heart beats over 100,000 times a day, pumping nearly 7,500 liters of blood. It has 4 chambers to atria and 2 ventricles, 4 valves that direct flow with the precision of clockwork, the tricuspid, pulmonary, mitral, and aortic valves. These valves open and close in perfect sequence, producing the familiar lube-dub of each heartbeat. Blood flows through 2 main circuits: the pulmonary circuit, which sends blood to the lungs for oxygenation, and the systemic circuit, which delivers oxygenated blood to every tissue in the body. Now, let us follow a single erythrocyte, or red blood cell, as it begins its loop. It leaves the left ventricle of the heart via the aorta, the body's largest artery. This cell carries oxygen, bound tightly to hemagglutinin, iron-rich protein that gives blood its red color as it travels through arteries, arterioles, and finally capillaries. The oxygen is released into tissues, fueling metabolism, motion, and thought. After delivering its oxygen, the erythrocyte begins its return journey through venules and veins. It enters the superior or inferior vena cava, depending on its origin, and flows into the right atrium. From there, it moves into the right ventricle, which pumps it through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. In the lungs, carbon dioxide is exchanged for fresh oxygen, and the cycle begins anew. But this red cell does not travel alone. Suspended in plasma, pale yellow fluid, composed mostly of water, are white blood cells, platelets, electrolytes, hormones, nutrients, and waste products. Each has its role in the maintenance of life. White blood cells, or leukocytes, are the guardians of the body. defending against invaders like bacteria, viruses, and parasites. Some, like neutrophils, act quickly and in large numbers, engulfing pathogens. Others, like lymphocytes, provide longer-term immunity, remembering past infections and preparing for future encounters. There are about 5 liters of blood in the average adult body, and every drop is filtered and monitored. This surveillance is supported by the lymphatic systema parallel network of vessels, nodes, and organs. Unlike blood, lymph doesn't circulate in a closed loop. It begins in the interstitial spaces between cells, where fluid leaks from capillaries. This fluid is collected by lymphatic capillaries and slowly moved through lymph nodes, small bean-shaped organs that filter debris and house immune cells. The spleen, too, plays a vital role. It filters blood, recycles old erythrocytes, and stores white blood cells. Meanwhile, the thymus, nestled above the heart, is where T lymphocytes mature, a process vital during early life. The flow of blood is driven by the pumping of the heart, but veins require assistance. Unlike arteries, veins have thinner walls and less muscular tone. They rely on skeletal muscle contraction and one-way valves to move blood upward against gravity. This is why a long period of stillness, such as sitting during a flight, can lead to pooling of blood and even deep vein thrombosis, a dangerous clotting condition. Specialized structures called venous reservoirs, such as those in the liver, spleen, and skin, can store large volumes of blood and release it when needed, such as during hemorrhage or intense physical exertion. These reservoirs are part of the body's strategy for volume control, maintaining homeostasis even under stress. As blood passes through the coronary arteries, it nourishes the heart itself. These arteries branch off the aorta just after it leaves the heart and wrap around the heart muscle like a crown, hence the name coronary. Blockage of these arteries, such as in a myocardial infarction or heart attack, deprives the cardiac muscle of oxygen. Without rapid intervention, the muscle dies, impairing the heart's ability to pump. Historically, humanity has tried to read the body through the rhythm of this circulation. In Ayurveda, the ancient Indian system of medicine, pulse diagnosis, correction involves subtle palpation of the radial artery to infer imbalances in the body's energies or practitioners train for years to detect changes in rhythm, strength, and character. In traditional Chinese medicine, the pulse is analyzed in multiple positions along the wrist, each corresponding to a different organ system. Modern medicine, too, has elevated pulse to a diagnostic tool. Telemetry, the remote monitoring of vital signs, allows clinicians to observe heart rate, blood pressure, and oxygen saturation from afar. Devices like smartwatches can detect arrhythmias such as atrial fibrillation or heartbeat patterns that may otherwise go unnoticed. The pulse, once felt by fingers on a wrist, is now digitized, analyzed, and monitored continuously, forming part of the expanding field of digital health. Yet, despite all this complexity, the circulatory system remains beautifully efficient. A single red blood cell completes its journey through the body in about 60 seconds. Over its 120-day lifespan, it travels the equivalent of 2 trips around the globe, powered by nothing more than pressure gradients and molecular diffusion. Even more remarkable is blood's role in memory, not cognitive memory, but immunological memory, the record of battles fought once a pathogen has been encountered. specific white blood cells, memory B cells, and memory T cells in the bloodstream, ready to respond faster and more effectively upon re-exposure. This is the principle behind vaccines. Train the immune system using a harmless mimic so that real threats are neutralized quickly. In disease, these rivers can falter. Anemia, caused by a deficiency of red blood cells or hemoglobin, leads to fatigue and pallor. Leukemia, a cancer of white blood cells, overwhelms the marrow's ability to produce healthy blood. Lymphedema, often following cancer surgery, causes swelling due to poor lymph drainage. Each condition reveals the delicate balance required to keep these flows intact. The circulatory and lymphatic systems are not isolated. They integrate with every other system, feeding the brain, cleansing the skin, powering the muscles, transporting hormones from glands to targets. They are highways of life, defense, and renewal. Consider that at this moment, billions of cells move within you unseen, tireless, interconnected. They carry oxygen to the fingertips, ferry waste from the toes, recall the virus from last winter, and heal the paper cut on your hand. They circulate not randomly, but with purpose, guided by valves, rhythms, and gradients, orchestrated by the heart, and refined by countless generations of evolution. These rivers do more than sustain, they unite. A single bloodstream nourishes the entire human organism, linking the skull to the souls, the brain to the bones, the present to the past. It is through this circulation that body and memory flow as one. And now, having followed the red cell's loop, we turn to the great conductor of these flows, the nervous system, the spinal cord, the brain. Let us now enter the forest of the mind, where thought becomes impulse and sensation becomes motion. Imagine you're walking into a forest. The air smells fresh with pine and damp earth, and above you, sunlight comes through the leaves. In this peaceful space, everything is connected. Life flows through the trees, the soil, and the water. From tiny insects to tall trees, every living thing plays a part in keeping the forest alive and balanced. It's a quiet order where the actions of one creature can affect the whole system. This is ecology in action, how nature works together. Whether in forests, oceans, or cities, all ecosystems are connected. In this section, we'll look at some real-world examples that show how these systems work and how they are affected by human actions. Our first example is the Amazon rainforest. Known as the lungs of the planet, the Amazon helps absorb carbon dioxide and make oxygen. But today, large areas of the forest are being cut down for farming and development. This doesn't just mean losing trees, it disrupts the whole ecosystem. Cutting down trees in the Amazon releases more carbon, making climate change worse. Fewer trees also mean less rain, which hurts both plants and animals, even disappear. And these effects don't stay in the Amazon. They impact the whole world, from climate to agriculture. But there's hope. Indigenous groups and conservationists are working hard to slow down deforestation. Efforts to restore the forest and use sustainable farming practices show that it's still possible to save the Amazon. Next, we turn to the oceans. One big issue is coral bleaching in the Great Barrier Reef. Picture going under clear blue water, where vibrant corals stretch in every color you can imagine. These corals are home to many species of fish and other marine life. But in recent years, the reef has been changing. Coral bleaching happens when corals get too hot and expel tiny algae that live inside them, and without them, the corals become weak and may die. Climate change, which warms the oceans, makes coral bleaching more common and severe. The loss of coral reefs, like the Great Barrier Reef, isn't just bad for the ocean, it also affects humans. Millions of people depend on coral reefs for food, jobs, and protection from storms. The decline of reefs threatens ocean life and the livelihoods of people living near the coast. But scientists are working on ways to protect the reefs, are growing heat-resistant corals, or trying to restore damaged reefs. The future of coral reefs depends on our ability to tackle climate change and protect these important ecosystems. Finally, let's look at cities. Cities have often been seen as places where nature gets pushed aside for buildings and roads. Now, many cities are finding ways to bring nature back. Urban green spaces, like parks and rooftop gardens, are growing in popularity. These green areas provide a home for wildlife and help improve the environment, lower the heat in the city, and help people feel better. Cities like New York, London, and Tokyo are becoming places where humans and nature can live together. Cities also show us how ecosystems change. Urban areas go through cycles of growth and change, whether from construction or new species moving. In cities are always evolving. These changes can provide new opportunities for nature to thrive. These examples, the Amazon, the Great Barrier Reef, and urban green spaces show how ecosystems are always changing. They remind us that human actions can either help or harm these systems. As we think about these case studies, we should ask ourselves, what role do we want to play in the future of the planet? Will we be passive, watching ecosystems decline? Or will we actively work to protect and restore them? Our choices, whether through supporting conservation or reducing pollution, can make a big difference. The impact of humans on the environment is clear, but there is still hope. By learning from these examples, we can create a better relationship with nature. The future of our planet is still being shaped, and we all have a part to play. Digestion begins long before food reaches the stomach. Sometimes it starts before a single bite is taken. The mere sight or scent of a favorite meal, baking bread, ripe mango, simmering stew, can trigger salivation. This anticipatory reflex, known as the cephalic phase of digestion, is the body's way of preparing. The brain, sensing that nourishment is near, sends signals to the salivary glands, stomach, pancreas, and intestines to ready their secretions. Enzymes stir, acids rise. The digestive orchestra tunes itself for the coming performance. The first act takes place in the mouth. Here, saliva, rich in water, enzymes, and mucins, begins the transformation. The enzyme amylase starts breaking down starch into smaller sugars. Lingual lipase prepares to act on fats, though its full activity will emerge later in the stomach. Meanwhile, the act of mastication, chewing, mechanically grinds food, increasing surface area for enzymatic action. This physical and chemical blending produces a soft, slippery mass called a bolus. Swallowing or deglutition is both voluntary and involuntary. It begins with conscious motion, but soon surrenders to reflex. The bolus slides past the epiglottis, which folds down like a gentle gate to shield the airway, and enters the esophagus. Through a series of rhythmic contractions, called peristalsis. The esophagus escorts the bolus downward toward the stomach, a hollow muscular organ shaped like a pouch or crescent moon. Its walls are layered with muscles and lined with glands that secrete gastric juice, a potent mixture of hydrochloric acid and pepsinogen. The acid unfolds proteins. Pepsinogen, activated into pepsin, begins digesting them. This phase is not just breakdown, it is containment and timing. The stomach churns the food into a semi-liquid substance called chyme, then releases it gradually into the small intestine, a winding tube about 6 meters long. It is herein the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum that true absorption begins. The chyme receives bile from the liver and gallbladder, which emulsifies fats, breaking them into microscopic droplets. It also encounters pancreatic juice, rich in enzymes like lipase, amylase, and proteases, targeted to a specific nutrient group. The enzymes act in parallel, digesting lipids, carbohydrates, and proteins into their absorbable units: fatty acids, monosaccharides, amino acids. The inner lining of the small intestine is a masterpiece of surface area. Like a plush carpet, it is covered with millions of villifinger-like projections that increase the absorptive interface. Each villus is further coated with microvilli, forming what is known as the brush border. This border is more than structure. It contains enzymes and transporters that finalize digestion and begin absorption. Imagine the villi reading your meal like Braille, decoding its structure, sensing its chemistry, and extracting nutrients with precision. Glucose is taken up through active transport, escorted into the bloodstream. Fatty acids are reassembled into chylomicrons and carried into the lymphatic system. Amino acids diffuse into capillaries. Vitamins, minerals, water all find their paths. But the body is not alone in this process. Within the intestines live trillions of microbes, vast and intricate microbiome composed of bacteria, fungi, viruses, and archaea. These organisms help digest fibers that human enzymes cannot, producing short-chain fatty acids that nourish the gut lining. They synthesize vitamins, such as vitamin K and biotin, modulate the immune system, and influence mood and metabolism. Each person's microbiome is unique, shaped by genetics, geography, and perhaps most deeply by diet. Consider fermented foods across cultures. In Korea, kimchi is spicy. Fermented cabbage dish contains lactobacillus species that support gut health. In Ethiopia, injera, a sour flatbread made from teff flour, is teeming with wild yeasts and lactic acid bacteria. In Eastern Europe, kefir offers a symbiotic blend of bacteria and yeast in a fermented milk drink. Each food is not merely nutrition, it is a living community, a continuation of microbial coevolution. The relationship between humans and microbes is older than history. Some researchers suggest that the ability to digest lactose persistence evolved in certain populations due to the long-term consumption of dairy. Others link seaweed digestion in Japanese populations to microbial genes acquired from traditional diets rich in nori. The microbiome, then, is not simply a guest, it is a collaborator, a resident alchemist helping to transform food into fuel, tissue, and thought. As nutrients are absorbed, they enter the hepatic portal vein, which leads directly to the liver, the body's metabolic command center. The liver filters and processes these nutrients, deciding which to store, convert, or send onward. It regulates blood glucose levels, detoxifies harmful substances, synthesizes proteins, and produces cholesterol and bile. What remains of digestion now enters the large intestine, or colon. Here, water and electrolytes are reabsorbed. The microbiome continues to ferment undigested material, producing gases and vitamins. The colon compacts waste into feces to be stored in the rectum and expelled through the anus in a final act of elimination. Yet even this is not a mere byproduct. It is diagnostic. Changes in stool, color, texture, or frequency can signal disorders ranging from celiac disease to colon cancer. The digestive tract is a mirror of health, constantly reflecting the internal state. There is something profoundly intimate about digestion. What we eat becomes us literally. It is how the outside world becomes inner matter, how the harvest becomes muscle, enzyme, and memory. It is also a dialogue between us and our food, between our cells and our microbes, between culture and chemistry. Shared meals pass down knowledge, shape microbiota, and forge connections across generations. From the enzymes in saliva to the whispered signals between gut bacteria and brain cells, digestion is a slow, continuous alchemy. It nourishes not just the body, but the self. And so, from the winding loops of the intestines, we move next to a different kind of communication, one that rides electrical impulses rather than molecules, and signals meaning faster than thought. The nervous system awaits a web of light and motion, linking all that comes next. As we near the close of our journey, let us pause for a moment and gently reflect on the intricate patterns that we have traced, patterns that at first glance may seem too vast or too distant to truly comprehend. Yet, in reality, these patterns are deeply connected to the very world we live in, the air we breathe, the food we consume, and the life that pulses within us. We began by stepping into the microscopic world, where unseen organisms, the bacteria, fungi, and microbes carry out vital roles within the ecosystems we so often overlook. These creatures are not mere passengers in the web of life, but rather the invisible architects of the cycles that sustain our planet. As we examined the flow of energy through ecosystems, we saw how sunlight is captured and transformed by plants, how herbivores and carnivores interact in delicate balance, and how decomposers return nutrients to the soil, feeding new growth. From this foundational energy flow, we ventured into the rhythms of life, the cycles of carbon, nitrogen, and water that span the entire globe, supporting not only the smallest organisms, but also the complex, large-scale systems that govern Earth. We journeyed next to the diverse ecosystems that make up the biomes of our planet, whether it was the tundra, a land of extremes, or the lush, thriving rainforest. Each ecosystem is a story of adaptation, resilience, and change. The plants and animals that call these places home are interconnected with their environment in ways that we are only beginning to understand. We saw that nature, in all its variety, operates according to fundamental principles of balance and interdependence, principles that have shaped life for millions of years. From here, we explored the dynamic nature of ecosystems themselves, delving into the processes of succession, disturbance, and resilience. Nature, we learned, is never static. It is constantly in flux, responding to external forces, whether they be fires, floods, or human activity. Through ecological succession, we see how ecosystems evolve over time, how they recover from disturbance, and how they adapt to changing conditions. These natural processes are a testament to the resilience of life itself, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, nature finds a way to regenerate and thrive. And yet, amidst these natural rhythms, we cannot overlook the role of humanity. Our own influence on the environment, for better or for worse, has been profound. From the practices of agriculture to the rise of urbanization and the looming threat of climate change, we have become a dominant force shaping the ecosystems around us. We have learned that while we have the power to disrupt, we also have the capacity to restore and protect. It is in our hands, perhaps more than ever before, to determine the future of our planet and our role within it. Through case studies of deforestation in the Amazon, coral bleaching in the Great Barrier Reef, and the evolution of urban green spaces, we have seen both the fragility and the potential for recovery. These examples, both sobering and hopeful, serve as reminders of the delicate balance that sustains life and the ways in which human actions intersect with nature. They ask us, quietly, what kind of future we wish to build. In our exploration of ecology's relevance to human life, we discovered how deeply interconnected we are with the environment. From the antibiotics derived from soil microbes to the renewable energy sources inspired by the natural world, we have come to understand that our health, our technology, and even our daily lives are shaped by the ecological systems that surround us. The invisible services provided by nature, purifying air, cleaning water, regulating climate, are not just luxuries, but necessities for our survival. And as we stand at the crossroads of innovation and responsibility, we are invited to consider, how can we, as individuals and as a society, align our actions with the rhythms of nature? As we reach this point in our journey, it is worth reflecting on the potential for future innovations. What if, in our quest to solve the challenges of the future, we chose not to act in defiance of nature, but in harmony with it? What if, instead of seeing the natural world as something to be controlled, we embraced it as a partner and invaluable teacher that has sustained life on Earth for eons? In the future, we may look back at this moment as a turning point when humanity began to seek solutions, not through extraction and exploitation, but through collaboration and understanding. We may discover that the greatest innovations lie not in our ability to dominate nature, but in our capacity to live within its limits, to honor its processes, and to adapt to its ever-changing rhythms. And so, as we close this exploration, we are left with a seed of curiosity, a question that continues to unfold with each new discovery. How can we continue to weave ourselves into the fabric of life, not as separate dominant beings, but as an integral part of the web, each thread adding to the strength and resilience of the whole? The answers lie in the future and, perhaps, in the quiet contemplation of the natural world around us.